Good morning, afternoon, evening, and or good night, whenever you may be watching this. We will be talking today about LAMDA, MFA, classical acting, week 8, day 5, Friday, November the 7th, 2025. Um, it's Monday morning when I'm recording this, so we're getting to it. It's great. So we don't have a warm up on Fridays because we go straight into ensemble singing at 9 a.m. Top Call It House with James Michaelos. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but it's James. And yeah, we did some good things. So starting out, he said that we really need to be able to reconcile the energy of singing um, with being emotionally honest, right? Because singing like gets you doing this, but like we don't talk like this. We just talk, right? I talked a little bit about that last week. How like you don't need analyzing, right? How that like gets you going. And that's not what we want. Don't emote with your head and neck while singing, like I said. You don't need analyzing. That's just comes off really false. Find the truth in the words, then transplant those words on the music and that truth, right? We walked the space, um, and then we went over the words, really looking for the truth. And we asked, like, what is this about, right? And don't just say it's about being in love, because obviously, but then the trick of that question was that there's two perspectives, right? There's the um I hear music and there's no one there, the person who's in love. And then there's the responder who's like, you don't need analyzing. It's not, it's not, you don't need analyzing. It is not so surprising that you feel very strange but nice. Anyway, right, so there's two perspectives, but it's about the loss and confusion and unrecognizability of love, and then someone who knows it and like identifying that problem, right? So also, um, the other thing is don't make generalizations and don't just use the lyrics when defining these things, because if you use the lyrics, then you could be off, right? That could be a crutch. So how can you put in your own words? And then lock in, right? The text is everything. If you understand the words and the journey, you won't lose the lyrics, and it'll really benefit you in the whole process. So know the text. Um, Something else James said is that when there's a load of people, um, it's the communicators who stand out, right? And he said it's pretty obvious. Like if you're in a mass audition and there's a bunch of people, the ones who are really communicating stand out just immediately. Shout out Sandridge. I feel like this always has a big old light on it. Sandridge. Oh. So yeah, so then we split up into two sections. We split up into one who's gonna sing I feel no I hear music, but there's no one there. And then the other side is you don't need analyzing. So we split up at two. And um we faced each other as groups and we are gonna communicate to each other. And then after doing that, like what did we observe? One of the things he mentioned was how at the beginning, like after the first line or so, you can like move around. You can move in space, and only a few people did it. And so he was like, that stood out to me immediately. So you want to be that person just because, like, in an audition, you want to be remembered, you want to stand out. And so they didn't do anything better or extraordinarily different. They just moved, right? And that stood out. Um, some other people observe that the other part wills you to respond, and yeah, like I talked about in this group setting, just doing something different is important. But don't be outlandish, don't be different for difference sake, like be justified in your action, but that difference can really help you be remembered. um right, also moving while you're singing can feel rigid and false. um right, but there's a process to everything. There's a flicker of thought, a breath, movement, and then you talk or sing, right? That's kind of how we we speak and communicate. So if the thought and the breath are set, then natural movement will follow. And then everything people say is meant to have an effect on people. Everything that's spoken, right? No matter how mundane a conversation is, that it's everything that's mentioned, said, me speaking now to my computer is meant to have an effect. So then we did it again and we paired up with someone. And so the person I paired up with sang the quicker part, you don't need analyzing. And I sang the I hear music and there's no one there. And it was really fun. It was conversational. It was a back and forth. The overlapped melody part felt like competitive and trying to get our points across. And yeah, at the end he was like, "We should do a duet together," and shook my hand. I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." Then we got a new song, Jenny of Old Stones, which is sung in Game of Thrones, and he just gave us um, the lyrics, and it was so hard to remember. I I don't remember it. I don't remember how it goes. But the idea, we got into smallish groups, like of 6 or 7. I think my group had 7, and we're gonna learn this song, and we're gonna create harmonies and soundscape. Not like he mostly wants vocal ideas, but yeah, we're gonna devise a musical idea with it. And then also in future classes and relationships and whatever with James, he wants us to get into even smaller and smaller groups. Um, and so we decided on 6 or 7 with this one. Yeah, and and that's gonna be fun. So that was ensemble singing. Then we moved to movement with Heriberto, and it was a continuation of last week's lesson about establishing movement, of establishing pace, place, and having movement be born of that isn't character driven or emotionally driven or conflict based. It's just movement. How does a space make you move? So we started by walking the space, and then we did this really fun game where um we had like 3 different colored balls, and as we were walking we threw them and then we caught them, and you couldn't take more than 2 steps with the ball, and our goal was to do it for a minute. And I was like, we could do it for more than that. We could do 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 or 10. Others did not feel the same. I think the record was 2 minutes and something, and that's like being really consistent, not just be like stop, boop, but try having that active continual movement. It was so fun. I loved it. We did eventually get to a minute, and I think our record was like a minute and 5 seconds, 10 seconds maybe. But ideally, he said we'll do it again. And we had 3 different balls. We had a red ball, a blue ball, and a yellow ball. And you're just moving and just like tossing it to each other. You can't just be like, "Hey, you," or this. It's not vocally communicative. It's all just physical and being there and being aware. And eventually, we're going to do that while saying lines. So that'll be cool. And then we did uh, a forest activity, just like we did with the haunted house last week. We created the details of a forest, And right, the details and the specifics were super important. And how can we share what we see with an audience? How accurate can we be about the space? And so we went around, we established where we were in the woods, and we tried to see it. And then we climbed up trees, and we went into different areas, and we did the whole shebang. And then, as we were imagining this, he then said um, that. Trying to remember the order. He said that we then had an unsatiable urge to get to the highest point in the forest, right? And as we were getting up there, the last bit was just like sheer rock. Um, so we got up and we had to climb up, and then the sunset, and we enjoyed the sunset, and then we could look down into the forest in the area that we were, and it was fun. I really like those imagination exercises. And then we brought it to our to individuals, just like we did with the peer and waving goodbye. And so the activity for this one was to see the space, our forest, and to show it to the audience, right? You start with your back to the audience, you turn around and you're there, you're in the space. How does your body change? Heriberto said, I promise you that if we were to go to the forest, you would be physically different. He bet us £1,000,000 that would be the case. Right? And then there's no character, emotion, drama, nothing like that. It's just the space. Show us the space. So someone went first, and it was really slow and purposeful and establishing that this is a tree. And then looking. And but it was all focused kind of on this one spot. So Heriberto says, don't make your space smaller, make it bigger, right? Bigger than the room. It expands, it's everywhere. And then don't slow down too much because a slow tempo um, equates and leaves room for thought, right? And we're not trying to think and be like, oh, think this, do that. We're just in the space, we're present, we're acting, as in making action, like an acting force, not like an actor. Don't forget to breathe. Sometimes we get all like caught up and don't breathe. Then how can you be specific and show that space? If you go to somewhere different, your body will change, show that change like immediately when you turn. And you don't have to have this slow turn. It's just boom, you're there. Do not disengage the body, right? You're not just slumping around, oh, look at the woods. Yeah. But you want to keep it in action. Your body needs to be at the level of the poetry, right? And so with Shakespeare specifically, it's this elevated speech. And so your body needs to match that elevation as well. A relaxed body is not more believable, realistic. Sometimes we're like, yeah, if I do less, it's more real. No, we're creating the reality. And the text and everything requires more, so we got to do and be more. Sorry, I got like phlegm in my throat. Um, so is the forest wild? Yes, it's wild. So we are wild in it. So how can we show that wildness? Um, we know how to bring conflict. What we need to do is illustrate a space, and that's what this exercise is about. Every time anyone got up and did something, conflict, you know, there was always emotion, and it was always driven by that, not driven by getting to a space or the obstacle or whatever it may be, right? We need to remove our own devised like stage tricks. Like we all have different things that we do, right? Like um, some of the things I do is I have this little like movement, like I don't know how to, this kind of floppiness that I think helps, and I think I do these facial feature little tricks and things that I do. But we're not doing that. That's not the point of this exercise. We're just stripping it all down and just seeing a space. Then someone else went and with about the same amount of success. Nobody got it. Nobody got to where he wants us. And I don't think if we will, you know, but he specified finding clarity in the space. Today, in today's world, the space is the protagonist. That's all that we focus on. And that's all that the actor seems to care about creating, but we need to create the space around us as well. And we need to switch into the space immediately, right? PJ Ross, that was the studio we were in. Boom, forest. In imagination, you can do all things, no conflict. The second person, they went to climb a tree and fell. And he's like, what was that? That was so emotional, so conflict, so conflicting. So this is your imagination. In this instance, you can do anything you need to do. Sure, there's effort involved. You don't want to just be like, I'm climbing a tree, because we can't understand that as an audience if it's effortless. But you can do it. It's your space. You can do it all. There is physical risk, not the kind of risk to hurt yourself, but it's a risk of discomfort and of vulnerability. We all wear masks. How can we strip them away? Then someone else went next, and um they got into the water, which was fun, and they like swung from tree branches and then got into water and was swimming, and then got up onto a bank. And to illustrate his point, Heriberto brought a piano and was like, no, try it on here, like to see the actual effort and difference it is to put it on. And so you identify the detail that you create by getting up there and putting that on. Um, and so then that was trying to be recreated, and really trying to find the specificity and truth in the detail of our actions. Then someone else went, and they went for like the rest of the time. It's not like exactly equal how much I've talked about each person, but um, so this was all about no fear. We always bring fear to the stage, so don't start afraid. The opposite side of fear is excitement. We slow down on stage when we are afraid. We don't want to slow down. We don't want to be tentative. We want to be there. There are always obstacles. Obstacles don't require conflict. They're just in the way. So we get over them, right? Boxes. This this student was trying to get to a waterfall, and there was rocks and mossy ground stuff. And so she doesn't need to be like, "Ah, I can't do it. Overcome it." Then that's a story, that's an arc, right? That's not where we're going for. We're just establishing space. So you can do the physicality of getting over things without showing the emotional experience. Bring the effort into the space. Don't worry about being effortless. I mentioned that. And then he didn't say that he didn't want you to feel anything, because we're constantly going to feel things, but he didn't want you to show the feeling, right? That's not what you're bringing to the audience. That's not the point of this exercise. The point of the exercise is to bring the space to the audience. You'll always be feeling something as a person all the time. Um, but once you focus on that feeling or show that feeling, it becomes about you and not about the space. This sweet person, they turn around, they took their minute. They're like, I was trying to see it. Did I take too long? Because he just starts laughing and then intervenes. And he's just like, just see it, which is hard for me because I want to like create it in my imagination, but I don't know how to do that. Have that immediate boom picture, trees, river, whatever it may be, right? Nature is full of different tempos, right? Characters too. Don't stay in one tempo too long. How can you change, right? You like observe, and then you see something new and you want to go over there, and then you're playing with something, and then it brings you over here and there's different tempos, right? So this person continued it with some of the lines from was going to do it with Richard the Second lines, but those were difficult and she doesn't have all of them memorized yet. So she went back to um, some midsummer lines that she learned, and was doing the movement and action with the lines, which is a fun thing because the lines should just be in our body and in our bones. Not there yet. But if our focus shrinks, so does the space. So if we bring our focus down to this moment, our space sinks down. So we need to keep it up and be looking and aware and inviting that whole space to exist for the audience. And then in theater, we have the ability to have long shots and close-ups by just our focus, right? If you're just right here at the audience, this doesn't matter. If you're looking out here and if you're reaching out to the space, then that becomes like your long shot, which is an interesting way to think of it. Um, and then think about kind of your objectives in a little bit, not as emotional, but just as what are you doing? Where are you going, right? Stay in the like where do you want to go and bring your focus where you're going to that waterfall and then stay in the action direction I want to go and move. Your body is wild, don't be domesticated. Oh, then someone else went, actually. I was wrong. That last person was not the last person. And then the first image was closing and small. And we need to open up the space and let the audience know it is the forest, right? Be careful about rushing to the future instead of living in the present. Is there no harmony in the world, right? Is there always this conflict and difficulty? Some people said yes. Um, I disagree. And so did Heriberto. But Heriberto was like, not everything has to be difficult and conflicted. You can just be, right? There can be harmony. Um, and you can't like nonchalance your way through a Shakespeare or through poetry. It's active, it's purposeful, it's intentional. And this is all about being present and specific. So then we had lunch and oh, then we had a fire drill. Um, I was going to change because I brought a costume for booths and Um, but as I was going to get my clothes changed, the fire alarm went off, so we all went outside, and then it started raining on us, which was great. And then we went back, and I got it changed. I just had like a button-up shirt, a tie, and some slacks and shoes. I always feel a little hindered by not having shoes in booths. That one's hard for me because I feel like shoes like adds changes a character so much. There's so many people like who would never be without shoes. Anyway. Um, But yeah, we this was our first time in the new format where there was more time for feedback. So we did half the class on today, Friday, and then we'll do half the class next Friday. But since I missed that week, I get to do this Friday and next Friday. Woo! And then we have one more after that, and we're done with booths, which is tragic. So, yeah, so the first person went, also had a bit of a costume, and he was a man who had like donated money to a kid, I think his son. Um, to go to like a prestigious college, but he was going to make it anonymous and accidentally put his name. And so now the son and his ex-wife or his um, wife that he's in trouble with, or it seems like that, right? We don't know all the details. He's talking to her and just like, oh, just right. um, just let me do it. Right. In life, we have a difficult conversation, and we plan out the beats. We don't always write it down or make it too specific, right? That's like life. So these projects, we can do similar things. His prompt for this was car salesman, which is fascinating because he took a car salesman and he sold the idea of letting him pay for this college, right? And he was selling something different, which is this guy's smart. And then is it like something we should ask ourselves? Is it nature or nurture the reason your character is a specific way, right? Did they become a car salesman because they were good at selling, or did they become good at selling because they were a car salesman, right? Just interesting little things. And there's a great little rug pull at the beginning. The way he started, he put his hands down and he was like, I am so proud of him, right? Which is a nice thing because we expect him to say, I'm so sorry. Just good writing. The objective was so clear and strong. You can do a lot with a little and have complexity behind the story, but reveal it like in the action, in the moment as you're revealing it. Um, this character was much more grounded. The actor came from a place of relaxation that uh, that made like his emotion and tension. It's kind of this paradox, this contradiction that if as an actor you come from a place of relaxation, then the emotion and tension of the character is more accessible. And then let the emotion come, right? It's kind of like this golf analogy. If you try to hit the ball as hard as you can and you're like forcing it, then you're gonna like chip it into the woods. But if you just let the swing take it, then there's a good chance and you like nail it straight down the freeway, fairway. I don't play golf. You'll hit it straight. Um, if you do the work, plan and create the circumstances, then the work for you is done, right? If you really understand the circumstances, then everything else is great, right? If you want to go off pure talent, uh, and we become forced and generalized. But if you do the specific circumstance work, then you're good. Then the next person went, and she was a research partner, cutting off um, her partner because he cheated on her or something like that, right? And the physicality was great. She had a blazer, she had glasses, and it was just really a different character than herself. And it immediately drew us in. We get to choose if we're going inside out or outside in, and it's all valid, right? Our processes are all valid if it gets us the kind of result we want. And great use of silence, and it built that anticipation. The prompt was to say, "How dare you?" And it was really great. And we talked a little bit about the constitution of the character, someone dealing with the sciences where there is a binary, and what do you do with the gray area of a relationship when you're so used to like there's a right and a wrong. And so it was a great use of creating a character that fit the circumstances. And then, can I put in much more work to understand my character? There is so much to explore, and and I was just kind of thinking how I could do much better, right? Because this person in my class did the work, and they really like kind of did Uta Hagen the 10 question variation with Lawrence, what he provided, and really like discovered this character and did great. I'm always so wishy-washy on my characters. But yeah. And then when you leave details out, it draws the audience in and makes them feel smart because they can figure it out a little bit. And it's good to make your audience feel smart. And you want them to be smart. And then the next person went, and he was a son of two parents talking to his parents and saying that like he's been a screw up and gotten into drugs and stuff, but now he's joining a cult, and he's inviting his parents to like see what the cult's all about. Um, and the prompt was to be untethered. And so he looked it up, and it was kind of this Buddhist sense of like being untethered from the world. And that got him down the route of being joining a cult. But there's great antithesis between what he was saying versus how he was saying it, because it was like really calm and like, I want you to see and know. And like, I think I've really found something special here. While he's talking about like this creepy cult. And then if this actor had judged his character, it would not have been performed in the same way, and it would have been much less interesting. And he mentioned that the meeting was going to be in Brighton, which is known as a really kind of like liberal town, like where people are really chill. And so to have a cult there was super interesting. And it's just little details like that that keep it alive and bring up questions and makes the work more engaging. Ask yourself, why would my character go into this booth and deliver this message this way, right? That's the booth. Um, Create specific specificity, and the audience will fill in the detail and fill in the rest, right? If you create specific circumstances but leave out like the details of it, um, the audience will fill in the rest of the character because they know someone like that, or it just will make sense to them. And then it was another specific, detailed, clear, and grounded character. It's great. Then someone else went, and they were giving information to create on how to create a cure for a deadly like zombie virus. And so the prompt, her prompt was to be fast and direct. And so you really need to know what she's saying. And she kind of made it hard for herself because she was talking about science and viruses and all of these things, but she like railed off the information. It was good. Um, and it's funny because she said that she found it quite difficult. And Ollie was like, that's good. I'm glad you found it difficult because that puts in the effort and shows the work and it's great. And then could have been done in another language and we still would have like understood, which is cool. And it played on another genre like zombie horror comedy, which is fun because I think we a lot of the time like turn in and we're just like, how can I make this as authentic and as sad as possible? I know I do. And then it was my turn, and I was struggling with this one. So I kept going back and forth with ideas, and I eventually went with the idea that I wanted to be, um, I was a father who was in mourning, and I was originally going to be talking to a hit and run driver. That's where I started. And then I was like, no, because I wanted to be a little more specific, a little more relationship between me and the person. And so I was like, okay, it's my only son's like best friend, and he got drunk and he got away, and my son died in an accident that he was drunk driving. And then I was like, ooh, what if he's my son too, but he's the screw up kid? And so you couldn't tell most of the stuff I'm talking about, but the idea was I was speaking to my older son who was a screw up, and he was in an accident, um, and it was his fault that my younger son died. His fault, right? And then that tortured my wife, and then she took her life. And it was just after the funeral um, with my wife, and he didn't show up to the funeral. And you could say that it's his fault too. And so my prompt was to ask why. And so it was all like turning in on myself about like, did I raise you wrong? I thought I gave you everything you needed. I loved you. I try to give you things. I never hit you. Should I have? Should I have been sterner? Should I have been cruel? Like what did I do wrong? And I didn't want to cry because that's something that's accessible for me and I don't want to rely on it all the time. And so I didn't. And it was just I was working off the stillness of my last character. And I don't know, I was aware of myself more than I would have liked to be, but um, I felt successful with it. My next prompt is to be a steel worker from Pittsburgh. So I'm looking into like Pittsburgh accents, dialects, and um, and all of that, right? So I need an idea. I'm thinking a lot about the character, but now I need a reason for him to go. And I want to take a comedic approach to this one. I'm thinking maybe he um like won the lottery and then blew it all on betting on the Pittsburgh Steelers or something. The Stillers. We'll see. Um, yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, I just wrote down asking questions is great to dive deeper into the character or the arc. And then the next person went, and she was a character named Veronica, and had been 15 years as a secretary who wanted more, asking about using her articles because her boss took credit for one of her articles. And she quits and told his wife about his affair. So the prompt was to be brittle and high strung. And it's interesting because we talked about how emotion comes from the friction between the obstacle and the objective, right? The grind of the rocks. There was a great arc and story of where she changed throughout the booth, which was cool as well. And right, and she said how, oh, she thought she like as she was realizing this, and she hadn't planned this, but as she was doing it, she thought, oh, maybe like I can become the boss and I can get his job. But the truth of the situation is like the whistleblower never gets anything, right? which is a sad truth of or likelihood of life. But playing against your natural temper is so fun and it's enjoyable, right? Have fun with it. Then the next guy went, and it was a message from a father to give the password to his son, which was based on a true story. How, like, to get into his house, you said superfragilistic and so the prompt was to be light, fast, and indirect. Oh, and this was like for the son's birthday. Um, and he had great world building, and it was a sweet character, you know. And it was a good job of not being overly sentimental because his dad, like, this was based on a true story, and he's like, my dad means a lot to me, and so he didn't want to just lean into that. But we, the audience, um, is part of like this bargain and this relationship that of the character. I don't know exactly what I meant by that. I remember it was good, and I was like, "Oh, I'm writing this down." Um, but yeah, that was good. And then another guy went, and he was telling his friend that they were always awful, and he was done with them. Um, and you don't need to show the audience that you've changed. You can just change because he had this moment where it was a realization. It's like, right? And different people will do different things in life, but so it could be just preferential, but that was more demonstrative than Ollie's thought was necessary. And then in the booth, you're under the microscope, and everything you do and say and change means something. So by just leaving and having that kind of release and change of posture when you leave the booth is enough. And that was the end of booths. And then we had voice with Tamsin. And we circled up and we reviewed what we were going to do. We were going to do some beach ball breathing on the floor. And then we were going to do some text work. And then we're going to talk about it. It was great. And we started with our own personal release work, just like whatever we needed. And Friday, yeah, always sleepy. So did what I could. But I was waking up a little bit, just doing a spinal release, and then we got out our mats and we laid down semi-supine, right? Knees up, back flat. And then we picked a spot on the ceiling ahead, like just straight ahead of us. And then we breathed into it on an S and a sh and a Z. Um, and we did some other things, but I fell asleep. Not like a lot, but it was just like a little bit. And then I was trying to listen. I was like, I don't know what's going on. It always happens in Tamsin's class. I feel so bad. Um, but then we got up in a table, right? Knees and hands on the ground, and we did some like spine movements, getting limber and loose. And then we did beach ball breathing. Um, right? So we have a beach ball and we did it on a Z. And the idea is that um you're breathing and you're bringing it in, and then you let your breath drop in. And then we did it with letting all of our air out to see how that was. Did we do this on the ground? I don't think we did. No, we got up to do this. Yeah. And then we did, I didn't write good notes because, yeah. Anyway, so we did this standing up, and then we dropped our beach ball kind of like at our waist, and we breathed into it, breathed out into it. Right? It's just the however long it takes. I breathe all I have a big breath. So um and then that turned into and then we added a line to it. And another thing is, and then we said it all together, and then that brought us into the alphabet. So, and another thing is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, blah, 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 right? But the idea was to stay really synchronized together. And it was cool. And so it brought like our ensemble awareness to breathing and supporting our breath. And then we got the prologue to Henry V, and we started working that. So we read through it to understand a little bit. We breathed it as we walked, and then we did this exercise where we all stood in a line at the end of Collett House top studio, and we walked across the side, and we would take a step with one word, and then we would add the second word and take a step on the last one. So, for example, to with the step to be. Well, you wouldn't go back, but I just don't have space. To be or not. To be or not to be or not to be, right? That's the idea. But we did it with just the first thought of Henry V. Um, yeah, we spoke it into the space and to individuals. And I noticed when we really talked about spreading it out to the space and the corners, it started to feel artificial. And so we brought it down a lot. And Tamsin asked me to speak to someone just like the way I would. And then I did, and it was much more natural, felt better. And then she added a bunch of distance between me and this person, and then said, "Now speak it to them again the same way you did before, but just add that the distance so that it needs to be louder." And that helped me kind of ground it again. And then we walked it while speaking it, and we stopped and tried to keep the tempo of our energy of walking and move of the movement. Um, yeah, and then we got into small groups of five and we picked a picture and we created kind of a soundscape collage with it. And our picture that we chose was a skeleton smoking by Van Gogh. And we had this like right, this all kind of space while one of our people just droned through it, just ooh, and we kind of had the movement to it like and that's fun. And then someone else did Edvard Munch's Scream, and then they had the face and the sound. And then there's another one that was a storm, and it was like very movement oriented. And that was the end of the class. And then I stayed at school for Black History Month showcase, which was so fun and left me with like righteous envy of the beauty of culture and shared experience. And it was really cool. Anyway, that was the last day of week 8. So now I'm going to start week 9. And yeah, so I hope you guys have a great time day life. I'm going to get a plug one of these days, a little beginning and a little end. Bye bye.